Before I comment, I just wish to say, Mr. Speaker, that so it was written in this book, so shall it be done. And I have full confidence that the government of Dominica will undertake every single project that is articulated and outlined in the 2023-2024 budget estimates. I will begin with the achievements of the fisheries sector, a sector which is very critical, Mr. Speaker, to the food security of the Commonwealth of Dominica. And I must say also, Mr. Speaker, a sector which is, I believe, undervalued and it is not much looked upon by our economists, and I think believe has a much greater contribution to the gross domestic product than is currently portrayed. Which is less than 1%, or in some cases less than 0.5%. Mr. Speaker, the fisheries sector, as we know, and many people like to say that the government still continues to use the Hurricane Maria as a scapegoat. But there are different types of industries, Mr. Speaker. Some which will take 100 years to recover from the effects of Maria, some it will take 1 year, some it will take 10 years, and we all have understanding of short-term, long-term, and medium-term, long-term, short-term, and medium-term. I would say something like the fisheries sector, where we depend on capture fisheries, which is a resource from the wild. With the ravages of Hurricane Maria, both on the fleet and also on the stock itself, our coastal environment, I had anticipated a long-term recovery for this sector. And we're looking at perhaps 20 or 25 years plus. So bearing this in mind, Mr. Speaker, the sector lost in its productive sector in terms of fisheries assets, about 63% of marine engines, 68% of boats, leaving only 30% left to provide us with the nutrition that we need, and even the surplus for exports for us to generate much needed foreign exchange or revenues. In 2018, and also, Mr. Speaker, in addition to these direct assets which are directly owned by fishermen, we had significant destruction of our own infrastructures, fishing ports, facilities, the Roseau Fisheries Complex completely out of commission, and the Marigot Fisheries Complex damaged, and some other smaller facilities we had at key landing sites, even in Soufrière Kotzed, the locker room building, one entire segment completely destroyed. And we have those cases in quite a number of areas on the East Coast and the West Coast. So we had well appreciated that this sector would take at least 25 years for recovery. So hence, whenever we speak about the fisheries sector in this current term, 6 years on, we cannot not speak without including within this whole context the events of Hurricane Maria. That being said, Mr. Speaker, we were able to be nimble, and people think that we do not have friends, to negotiate and speak to our friends and find with it our own selves, our own resources to deal with the problem at hand. At first, we received funding from friendly government, the government of Japan, for the complete rehabilitation of the Roseau Fisheries Complex and the Marigot Fisheries Complex, which in November 2022, last fiscal year, was handed over to us by the government of Japan in a ceremony held at the fisheries complex, where we have returned to the fisheries sector the production of more than 10 tons of ice, which is the lifeblood of the fishing sector since we are promoting food safety. We have now returned our fish storage capacity with the capacity to store over 40 tons of fish at any given time. We have returned the vendors of the various parts of Dominica, especially from my dear friend's constituency, the member for Soufrière, to an area where they can work in an aesthetic environment, again, with the fullest regard for occupational health, including hygiene, sanitation, and food safety, Mr. Speaker. In addition, the Fisheries Division, which is the agency responsible for managing the fisheries resources of the state, have been returned to an area where they can operate and fully function and to uphold and to implement the mandate granted to them by the government of Dominica and the Fisheries Act 11 of 1987, which is the brand new fisheries office on the top floor of the Roseau Fisheries Complex. With that being said, Mr. Speaker, all of these things I have mentioned were implemented less than the 25 years I have just mentioned. In addition to that, while through our own funds, the government of Dominica have been making tremendous investment simultaneously in other small landing sites. And we have just seen the completion of the rehabilitation of a breakwater in the Stowe landing site, which amounted to about $130,000, Mr. Speaker, in a very difficult time where financial resources are scarce. But people have the tendency to say that the government do not care about the fishers of Dominica or do not care about the fisheries sector. So this testament is contrary to what is being said, Mr. Speaker. And the fishers operating from the entire south, not only from my constituency, but we have fishers from Grand Bay, Tete Mon, Fontaine, Bagatelle, all the way from Bellevue Chopin on a daily basis and performing very well at that, Mr. Speaker, being very thankful to the government for this intervention, which has kept their assets very safe from the last event we had of Tropical Storm Brett. And Tropical Storm Brett provided a test for this breakwater, and it stood its ground, Mr. Speaker. A lot of investment also have been going into the fishery sector from other projects led by the government of Dominica. The Dominica Emergency Agricultural Livelihood Climate Resilience Project, which sometimes people say in short term the World Bank project, but we have debunked that name and say it is the project of the government of Dominica funded through the World Bank. And in last fiscal year, through this project, we granted 108 engines, Mr. Speaker, to the fishers, amounting to almost $1 million. And the good thing about these engines, these are not your ordinary engines. We have moved away from two-stroke technology and have introduced to fishers, Mr. Speaker, engines which are four-stroke technology so that we can reduce our emissions, so that we can make a meaningful contribution towards cutting of greenhouse gases. Mr. Speaker, in addition, we have been preparing in the past financial year 6 boat builders, building their capacity, providing with much needed tool equipment, each of them receiving tools and equipment amounting to $13,500 in preparation for a broader upcoming project and capacity into the fisheries sector. And for the new financial year, I will explain what they are preparing themselves for. In aquaculture, Mr. Speaker, we have removed ourselves from ground zero to zero aquaculture and post-Hurricane Maria to a moment now where we have at least 10 full-time aquaculture farmers practicing aquaculture, and especially in the production of giant freshwater prawns. Now, this practice is not to be taken lightly, Mr. Speaker, because each of these 10 individuals would have had to capitalize their own farms. And these farms, any of these given farms, Mr. Speaker, will cost in excess of at least $100,000 per farm. So these are individuals who have not only come on board, but have come on board because of the confidence that they have that they will receive their support, and they have been receiving their support from the government of Dominica, specifically the Fisheries Division and its aquaculture unit, in terms of technical assistance, equipment, and other sort of assistance. Because nobody makes investment if they do not have confidence in the market and in the support. So we have at this moment, I will reiterate, 10 full-time farmers investing in the production of giant freshwater prawns. In addition, we have enhanced the capacity of our own hatchery at our Jimit aquaculture site. This hatchery last year producing over 140 post-larvae. This is the small prawns that we donate, that we give to farmers so that they can grow out. And I must say, Mr. Speaker, that each and every farmer who is engaged in aquaculture now have received all of these post-larvae from the government free of charge, Mr. Speaker, amounting to more than $200,000 in terms of the cost of the government producing these post-larvae and giving it to farmers as an incentive, subsidizing them so that they can reduce their costs and focus on production free of charge. And in doing so, I must mention, because there is always the parliament is the best place, I believe, to give Jackie's jacket or Jacqueline her lipstick or a rose, if you may say, to deserving individuals. And I wish to mention that Mr. Dorian Sanford, that Mr. that Mr. Dorian Sanford, yes, from the Kalinago territory, our main aquaculturists, our expert aquaculturists, have been the one leading all of these efforts, Mr. Speaker. A civil servant at the highest level who knows no bound in terms of service, who has worked diligently and hard towards recovery of the aquaculture sector. Mr. Speaker, more broadly, the facility currently concentrates again on another product, while giant freshwater prawn has been the product that we have been pushing, but we are now going to invest in tilapia production. And tilapia production is not only for the market, but we recognize to develop our own resilience as a nation, we have to provide alternative food source. So though we understand we have an abundance of fish, but you never know what could happen. And we are presenting tilapia as an alternative food source, especially for individuals who live inland and do not have ready access to the coast. And if they want to consume a high value protein, as is already being done in the Kalinago territory, Mr. Speaker, it is not something that we are proposing, but it is something that we are looking to enhance and to almost every Dominican who have the capacity to do it. And it is not as labor intensive and capital intensive as the growing of giant freshwater prawns. In collaboration with the Food and Agriculture Organization, the government of Dominica has provided additional financing in addition to the technical support on the post-larvae to the tune of over $300,000 by providing direct support towards excavation of ponds, provision of pond liners, and even tools and equipment to assist them, Mr. Speaker. So we have been doing from this small unit and division and putting tremendous resources into the industry. Mr. Speaker, in terms of mariculture, which is also a type of aquaculture, but mariculture occurs in the marine environment, hence the word marry. And I just tend to separate it because a lot of times I think also the parliament is a place for education. So I love to educate, Mr. Speaker. As you know, a lot of us love this famous beverage called CMOS. For whatever various reasons that you may like it, for what it can do for you, or what you have seen it do for others, Mr. Speaker, or for your own nutrition, it is all up to you. Depends on why you love CMOS. But the sad thing is, while this is a very popular beverage, and we have two well-known companies existing for quite some time, Benjo CMOS, Benjamin CMOS, and a large number of small processors who sell on the roadside, Juiceman and so on. But the sad thing is, almost 100% of the CMOS is imported, Mr. Speaker, from neighboring islands. And we felt to ourselves that this is something that we have to address, especially taking into consideration the pronouncement by CARICOM to reduce food import by 25% by 2025. And we felt that we too should play our part. So we have invested heavily into promotion and propagation and CMOS farming. So to begin with, we thought that we should start on a pilot. And I should say that CMOS, we are used to harvesting CMOS from the wild, but in very small quantities, which is almost negligible in terms of any sort of commercial scale in areas of Calabishi and some places of the Northeast. So what we have done to pilot this CMOS propagation, first we had to do our own study, and we received funding and assistance from the FAO, and we did the assessment of several crops, because we were looking for a crop within the ministry as what would we promote and what would we upscale, because a lot of times this is the issue that we have. We do not have something that we can really upscale. And we looked at moringa, we looked at coconut, we looked at passion fruit, a wide range of scales. And at the end of the day, after putting all of these products through a matrix, to be fair and unbiased, CMOS emerged as the winner, as a crop, and I call it a crop, a seaweed, a product with the highest potential, commercial potential for export, market, and commercialization. So hence this was the data and the background at which we decided to thrust ahead with CMOS production. And so far we have, working with three groups, Mr. Speaker, a group in Grand Bay, a group in Kalibishi, Seaforth, almost 100% are women, a group in Woodford Hill, the Wooty CMOS group, and all of which are doing at this moment, Mr. Speaker, extremely well. From their first production, yielded 100 pounds per cycle, which is between 4 to 5 weeks or 5 to 6 weeks. Currently, with their experience, are now yielding from that same cycle 600 pounds every 4 to 6 weeks. And we are hoping by the first quarter of 2024, they will have mastered the craft so well and increased in their production that each of these groups will be yielding at least 1,000 pounds every cycle. So this would be a tremendous improvement, Mr. Speaker, in the propagation of CMOS. From that, Mr. Speaker, the program will expand to all of sundry who have the capacity. And again, I must say, Mr. Speaker, it has a very low investment cost. So it is very appealing to any one of us who seem to reside on the coast, and once there is space that does not interfere in any other fishing or recreational activity, we can use the sea to maximize the output of CMOS production and cut at least by 2025 the import of CMOS in Dominica by at least 80%, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there were many good investment and news in fisheries. But the one I want to highlight at the end is that the average fisheries production for the past 30 years, Mr. Speaker, prior to Hurricane Maria, we average about 1,000 tons per annum, and that is all different species. And with the effects of Hurricane Maria on the fishing fleet, more than 60% being out of commission, our production dropped by 30%. And our production was around a little over 700 tons. Since then, with the investments in the fisheries sector, publicly from government, and to be fair to our fishers, also massive investment privately by fishers who are very serious about the trade and who went to forge ahead of government support. I wish to report in 2022, we are now back and above the level of primary production, averaging more than 1,000 tons of fish in 2022. So we are well on the way. This is above expectations. It is way beyond my expectation. I had projected, Mr. Speaker, by 2025, we would have returned to primary level. So we are 2 years ahead. So therefore, I can move my production, I can move my projection ahead and say by 2025, we could possibly reach 200,000 tons in 2025, having more than adequate fish for our own domestic need and meeting all the, our export demand, especially from our regional partners, Mr. Speaker, contributing significantly not only to food security, but our foreign exchange earnings. Mr. Speaker, now I wish to go into what it is that we have in plan for this new fiscal year. And it's unfortunate that the leader of the opposition is not here. And the only thing that burned me, Mr. Speaker, I mean, people could say what they say in their speech in the rebuttal, but one thing burned me, and it hit me hard. Speaking about intellectually bankrupt. Mr. Speaker, I have a group of colleagues in this parliament. I think most of us are intellectually crazy and mad. and have too much intellectual capacity for me to hear that the leader of the opposition, saying that this government is intellectually bankrupt. Because you have to be intellectually crazy after investing more than $1 billion in international airport, still have the courage and confidence to want to build a marina at over $100 million and still over $100 million and still want to build a cable car and still want to have geothermal by 2085. I mean, these are intellectual crazy people, Mr. Speaker. And we are high. We are high on our own confidence. We are high on our own experience. And we have to go by track record. It will show that all of these I have mentioned, including those in God's book, the government of Dominica's book, shall be attained and will be attained, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, going forward, I also want to thank other members of Parliament and my colleagues, as the Honorable Prime Minister, the leader, the member for VCAS, I should say, and the member also for the Soufrière constituency for enhancing my budget. Because you heard during the budget presentation the hype on the blue economy and the entire Ministry of Agriculture in general. And when I calculated, Mr. Speaker, because I cannot understand, with such a big book, for days I've been going through it. This morning, my daughter was sitting with me at 4 o'clock in the morning. And she thought I was coloring a coloring book, but I have my highlighter, looking at everywhere. And she was helping me to color, Mr. Speaker. She was helping me to color. I would just point to her the relevant areas, and she would color it with the highlighter. And the blue economy, Mr. Speaker, over $115 million in the blue economy in this budget. And thanks to PM, I borrowed this 112 million. I borrowed 1.5 million from my colleague from the Soufrière constituency for the much needed and timely rehabilitation of the jetty in Anzime. And when I added it to my own 2.4 million, over 16.848% of this entire budget is going to be spent in the blue economy and in salt water. And I say in the salt water, Mr. Speaker, because I like salt. And my former pal rep, a good friend, is a doctor. My very good colleague sitting next to me, Dr. Williams, the member for La Plaine, is a doctor. And we have our Minister of Finance, a good friend from the Roseau Valley, is a doctor. So I like salt. So I don't want them to advise me otherwise. So that's why I find it this morning I could not absorb the presentation by the leader of the opposition, because it had no salt, Mr. Speaker. And hence it was not palatable to me, to be honest. It really was not palatable to me. I really could not eat it. So therefore, because I could not eat it, there is nothing for me to regurgitate. Because you can only regurgitate things that went down, and it didn't go down. So I will continue. I will continue, Mr. Speaker. A very exciting time for the fisheries sector. And I should say the fisheries sector, while I will speak on the blue economy, the other aspects of the blue economy, but the fisheries sector is a pillar of the blue economy, which really cannot be divorced. I mentioned that we have trained, or we were training, or we're improving the standards of 6 boat builders, Mr. Speaker. And they are all competent in their own right. So if you notice, I use the word enhance their capacity. And these 6 individuals are going to build for us in this financial year additional capacity in the fisheries sector. 53 boats, Mr. Speaker. 53 brand new fiberglass boats with improved standards, considering all of the key standards in the world of occupational health and safety. So that if anything were to happen to these boats on sea, Mr. Speaker, they could float until somebody comes to rescue them. And we have put a lot of effort by bringing down all the way from India, Mr. Speaker, all the way from India, a naval architect to assist us with that, Mr. Speaker. And they have trained these 6 individuals very well on top of their skills that they had to produce for us 650 free boats. And the member from Sufra should be very happy because a large portion of these boats are going to go to the Sufra constituency, where we are fairly so because they received the most devastation. But I must say this individual, before people start to say things, these 53 individuals were assessed, were interviewed, were validated for their loss. So this is not about the Labour Party government assigning things to people. Vaiki vai, Mr. Speaker. So I wanted to make that very clear so people do not come to me looking for their share. These 53 boats are already assigned to 53 individuals who were well vetted, Mr. Speaker, and who are bona fide fishers on top of that. Okay. Mr. Speaker, we have, within the fisheries sector, a lot of individuals do business on their own. And we always had a long history of cooperative societies, groups, and associations, Mr. Speaker. But along the way, a lot of these organizations have fell along the wayside. And a lot of it has nothing to do with government, but changing time, changing businesses, changing market structure, changing practices. But we don't want to just leave them on the merry or let them die. So there are a few fisheries cooperatives as we speak, Mr. Speaker, who have some semblance of capacity that we can enhance and that we can support. So under the Productive Alliance component of the ILCREP or DILCREP, you can put the D before it to say Dominica Emergency Agricultural Climate Resilience Project, Mr. Speaker, we will enhance at least 6 of these cooperatives and bring them up where they need to in terms of their marketing, their business model, their structure, their membership, so that they can serve the fishing industry well. They can help us in implementing our programs that we have for the fishers, and we don't have to always rely on individuals. So the Productive Alliance will provide much needed, not only technical support, but what people crave most to make things happen, Mr. Speaker, financial support. Mr. Speaker, sometimes we learn from adversity. And I can tell you, while Maria may not bring for people very good memories, but there are lessons learned that we are grateful for. And one of them is, prior to Maria, we over-relied on a lot of our larger facilities. For example, the Roseau Fisheries Complex, the Marigot Fisheries Facility, the Portsmouth Fisheries Facility, to provide most of the services that the fishing sector required, such as ice production capacity, such as fish storage, and so on. So these are the key services. But what we have realized, Mr. Speaker, when we lost the Roseau Fisheries Complex, which had almost maybe 70% of all of the services required for the sector, we found that we were grounded to a halt. And so, but it's not criticism. That is learning from the past. So since then, the government have implemented a policy that we will once again, as we have done before, build the capacity of the organization and groups in the individual smaller landing sites outside of the major one. And we are going to do so in a major way, Mr. Speaker. Are we going to continue doing so? Because we have already started doing so. To a number of fish landing sites, we have already provided ice machines. We have already provided ice machines. We have already provided fish handling equipment so that they can sustain themselves in case that we lost the major facility, Mr. Speaker. And in this financial year, we will spend an additional $2.4 million, Mr. Speaker. This is real money that we have already secured to do additional capacity enhancement in Stowe, Soufriere, Scott's Head, Newtown, Foncole, Bioche, Dubla, Mr. Speaker. And in all of these areas, in their own unique way, we will receive interventions in different forms. So for example, in Newtown, we pass by, we see that we have a fish vending area. We'll improve the aesthetics of this area. We'll improve the the health and safety aspect of the area. In also doing that, we'll also increase and improve the occupational health and safety. So all of these areas, Mr. Speaker, will receive intervention of no less than 100,000 US dollars injection in every site. Mr. Speaker, in addition to what I have just mentioned, the 2.4 million, Mr. Speaker, there are additional projects which we have secured grant funding for, and which does not fall under the typical PSIP arrangement, but nonetheless, it is much needed grant funding which the government and the ministry have secured. And also these funds will go into some of these same landing sites, Mr. Speaker, to further enhance what this 2.4 million is doing. So for example, we'll do a serious intervention, a further intervention in Maho, and I hope, I'm a bit disappointed that the former parliamentary representative from Maho is not there, because he is here, because I know he has been very hard on my case for a long time, telling me, what about Maho? Where is Maho? He's not here in Maho. So I need to let him know that we'll be having two major interventions in Maho, and the much needed port rehabilitation will come on stream. You have an ice machine, will improve the aesthetics of the entire vending experience in Maho, former pal rep of the Maho constituency. It's a long time coming, but good things come to those who wait. Yes. Mr. Speaker, again, additional capacity equaling to about 40,000 euros will go into the, about 36,000 euros will go into the community of Layu, and I will say that will significantly boost the capacity of the fishers Layu to do several things, Mr. Speaker. To increase the fish production by the introduction of additional fat technology, and that is to catch the large pelagic species. We will, Mr. Speaker, enhance their own storage capacity so they do not have to rely on going to Roseau. They could store their own fish for several days, so that will make them independent, and not only independent, Mr. Speaker, will make them resilient. In addition, the historical and cultural TTV sector, Mr. Speaker, which I must admit had received in the past very little attention from the ministry, will now have our much highly anticipated attention, Mr. Speaker. And it's not only in that we will assist the individuals who are involved in that industry, but we are now preparing ourselves so that we can collect the necessary information and data from this industry to inform future policies going forward as to how we protect and conserve and manage this cultural industry, Mr. Speaker. So there are many exciting things, Mr. Speaker, I have just mentioned that will come to the fisheries industry. In addition, I want to say all of these interventions will put us well on our way towards contributing to the overall policy target of 700 million by 2030. It is very ambitious, but we are known to be a government and a parliament that is very ambitious in achieving high targets. And again, the experiences for themselves I have alluded earlier on, so I will not even continue to speak of what is the track record. And we would need to contribute the fisheries sector, Mr. Speaker, and the blue economy on a whole, at least $47 to $48 million addition to our current value, what we are producing to the sector, so that we can do our meaningful contribution. And I have no doubt, Mr. Speaker, that we will be able, to make this meaningful contribution of this additional investment or additional value to the GDP of Dominica, and for the fisheries sector to gain its rightful place where it belongs in the overall scheme of contribution to the national food security protection of this country. Mr. Speaker, to the other major sectors of the blue economy which has not been traditionally covered, and the Minister of Finance or the member for the Roseau Valley constituency made mention of many of these interventions that we are going to make. And he did so very well, which I felt to myself, and so clear and articulate, that I thought he was a blue economy man like me. But in the valley has no sea. So that means that that he was well taught and he's well read, Mr. Speaker. The blue economy essentially is not new. What is new, Mr. Speaker, is our ability to take advantage of the untapped areas. This is what is new. As I mentioned earlier, fisheries is a traditional area of the blue economy, such as maritime transport and such as recreational tourism, marine recreation. These are the traditional areas. But there are also untapped areas and vast resources that we have, which we need to make more use of or increase our revenue from, Mr. Speaker. And to do so, we have aligned ourselves with very major players internationally in the world of the blue economy, or even in the whole sphere of management of marine resources. And you would have heard previously in the budget address to the mention of the National Geographic Society. And anybody here who watch anything other than Netflix or African movies and who look for educational things to watch, you would know of, Mr. Speaker, you would know of the National Geographic Society, an institution that is well known for its science, an institution that is well known for world explorers, and an institution that exists for over 100 years. So when you have a partner like that, Mr. Speaker, willing to partner with you, willing to put in the necessary investment, funding into assessment last year, or is it this year, last year, of the entire coastal marine environment of Dominica, Mr. Speaker, you can say that we have a positive partner. And Mr. Speaker, after these assessments, in consultation and collaboration, in discussion with National Geographic, we have proposed a number of initiatives that will significantly increase our revenue from our blue space. And you heard mention of, Mr. Speaker, the creation of the world first ever sperm whale marine reserve. And for those of us who are really not familiar with the sperm whales, and I like the word, I mean, but think of, again, those of us who wish to watch a bit more than Netflix and African movies, the importance of what the...
Which word you like?
Netflix, Mr. Speaker. Look at towards what is happening in Rwanda. The value of a gorilla to the economy of Rwanda. And we can have the equivalence in Dominica, the value of this sperm whale to our own economy. At this moment, Mr. Speaker, the reason why this sperm whale is different than anywhere else, because it is a migratory species, it could go anywhere, is because of the uniqueness of Dominica and our bathymetry. We have very deep waters, so therefore these species of whales can find food almost whole year round without having to migrate. So this is the reason why we refer to them as resident sperm whales, Mr. Speaker, and they have become a permanent resource in the country. And at this moment, Mr. Speaker, we have we call them in our world 15 units or 15 families of sperm whales. Each of them have various numbers of residents. Some have more than even 20, some have 5, some have 10. So any given day, Mr. Speaker, the likelihood or the chances of seeing a sperm whale is really more than 90%. Hence why Dominica has become the sperm whale viewing capital, or the capital where people come to swim with sperm whales. But coming back to the whole initiative, Mr. Speaker, it is to maximize the benefit from this very gentle giant and interesting resource. So hence we will create the first sperm whale reserve in the world that will encompass almost stretch across the entire west coast. And in doing so, we will work with the National Geographic and the IMO, International Maritime Organization, to implement specific shipping lanes so that marine traffic, both recreational, tourist, commercial vessels, can traverse through specific lanes so that they would enter our ports. And I've already explained before, these shipping lanes will have no adverse effect on the cost of marine transportation, so that we can use it as an excuse of why we have an increased price in our commodities at the supermarket, Mr. Speaker, just to make things clear. Mr. Speaker, additional measures within the sphere of the blue economy will be very important. If we're going to build a resource, sustainability has to be a key pillar in everything that we do, because we are dealing with an environment where if we are not careful, we can degrade very easily by our very own actions. So in doing so, Mr. Speaker, we are also proposing under our Blue Economy Initiative that to improve and enhance our management capacity of our existing marine reserve. And we have two of such marine reserves, Mr. Speaker, the Fisheries Kotzed, which is well known, and also we have what we call the marine section of the Cabrit National Park. And as a matter of fact, the marine section of the Cabrit National Park is a much larger in size than the actual terrestrial and component. So we believe in effecting appropriate management in these areas where you could enhance our marine recreational activities, increase the number of water sports activities, increase the number of dive sites, will significantly increase the revenue and increase the number of individuals we have visiting Dominica for marine recreational activities. Mr. Speaker, I also want to mention that we also have other ambitions to create new reserves.
15 more minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To create new reserves. And these new reserves, Mr. Speaker, are in keeping with our international obligation. And those of us who know our environment, and my colleague from the Kalinago territory, and also I know my colleague from the Gombe, are very astute in matters of the environment, will know that since around 2002, we have obligated through international conventions, the Convention especially on Biological Diversity, to at least set aside 10% of our ocean space for our protection. But we have not been able to do so, and we have only been able to set aside only minuscule, which is less than 0.5%. And I need to say again, Mr. Speaker, for a matter of education, the land space of Dominica is 751 kilometers square. Do you know that the exclusive economic zone of Dominica, Mr. Speaker, is 28,500 kilometers square? Hence, you can see why this vast area of ocean space, which is relatively untapped, have really the potential to even maybe rival the CBI program, Mr. Speaker, if we put in the right investment and we do what we have to do. The land space is only about 2.6% if you do your math. I did some rough math right in my head there, Mr. Speaker. Yes. 751 divided by 28,500. I think that equates to around 2.6%. Okay, Mr. Speaker? Yeah, and I mean, that is why I told you that it touched me this morning, this one statement. But Mr. Speaker, before I end, I want to say that in addition to that, there is an ongoing project which I must mention, and which is the Cetacean Translative Initiative Project, which we called the SETI project, a project which has already done wonderful work, a project valued at about $20 million US, a highly ambitious project, just like the government of Dominica. And this project is seeking to decode the language of the whale. And this project has been implemented in action for about 2 years, has approximately 5 full-time employers, high-level pay, right there in the soil of Dominica, have assets, marine-free vessels, and including, and also this year, we'll put additional investment into this. And the government of Dominica by extension, the ministry is an equal partner to this project, which a lot of people do not know. And in this coming fiscal year, Mr. Speaker, we will bring over 25, and I believe it's more than 25, of the world's best in information technology, in robotics, in AI to Dominica through this Citation Translative Initiative Project Dominica. And we are talking people from MIT, Berkeley, Harvard, Amazon, and all of the top institutions in the United States you can think of are currently engaged in this project. And at this moment, as we speak, we have a full-fledged functioning robotics lab at the Harvard University, specifically dedicated for this project that is based and being operated in Dominica, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I can go on and on about the initiatives that we have planned, but I really want to give credence to the budget and to mention things that are in this budget that will benefit the people from the Petit-Savane constituency. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to quote the number, the value of this intervention, but I say maybe some of my colleague members might go a little jealous. So I say I will avoid these figures. Nonetheless, I will just mention them, Mr. Speaker. The long-awaited Shotwell Road, to a tune of $5.9 million, should start any moment now, maybe even tomorrow morning. The contract has been signed. The project was divided into two lots. Two contracts were signed. The site has been handed over, Mr. Speaker, and work shall begin anytime soon at a cost of 5.9 million. I cannot help myself. I said I was going to mention the figure, but I will mention it at 5.9, Mr. Speaker. In addition, Mr. Speaker, we should have the implementation of the Bellevue Petit-Savane brand new primary school at a cost of $1.7 million, Mr. Speaker. And Minister for Education or the member from Castlebros will say more about it because I don't want to take too much wind from what she has to say. But I must mention that this will bring a much needed relief to the children of Petit-Savane who have to travel to Buffet State, and much needed relief to the students of the Bellevue area who their classes are a bit separated, and to bring some structure and to bring learning into an area which is ambient so that we can hone and the skills that we will need for the future of this country, Mr. Speaker. Also want to mention, which the member from Grand Bay mentioned this morning, that again in the budget that we will continue with the Loubier to Grand Bay Road, first phase, and the overall, the ambition is to get to Bagatelle, Mr. Speaker. The water is finished. Will you bear with me 1 minute? For me to recharge? So, Mr. Speaker, as much as I have heard in the media and about the relationship with the UK, I think this demonstrates that our partnership and our relationship with the government of the United Kingdom is still strong. So this project will forge ahead. And I believe in a press conference recently, the Prime Minister explained the delay. And that is what I like, again, from the contribution from the member from Grammy this morning. It was honest. He was honest about the things that were lacking. He was honest about the things that would hurt us. He was honest about the challenges that we had. And the Prime Minister, I will say, have explained to the public in a recent press conference as to the reason for the delay in implementation of the road. And I believe in this financial year, we'll get over the delays and implement. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to say, the much talked about the rejoining of the Petit-Savane and Dalis area. And again, my colleague from the Lapin constituency will also mention, but I want to say this fiscal year, it was never mentioned before, I must say, Mr. Speaker. So there was talks and rumors as if government will never do it. But I want to say to these naysayers, Mr. Speaker, government will do it. And even if we do it incrementally, but we will begin this financial year and do what we can, Mr. Speaker, so that the entire country will be connected once more through the Petit-Savane area, Mr. Speaker. In a nutshell, Mr. Speaker, I could say much more, because this budget or this book from God, I believe, yes, this book from God, the government of Dominica, I believe has all of these solutions going forward, so that we can have an economy that is rebounded and people can get, there are things, different strokes, how do they say it? There are different strokes for different folks in this budget, Mr. Speaker. And so I really and truly, the member from Grand Bay has made his fair share of rebutting the address that was made this morning and in debunking the notion that this budget is not a budget for the people, Mr. Speaker. With this, I will end and say thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Grant not going. Good I go? Yeah, Grant go.
I advise that the House be suspended for dinner and we can resume at 8 or 7:30 p.m. I second that.
Anybody seconding?
Second it, Mr. Speaker.
It has been moved and seconded that House be suspended until 7:30 p.m. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. House stands suspended until 7:30 p.m.